Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Audiobook series. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today we are picking up where we left off last week with the Gathering. Now, where we last left off, the heroes have traveled to the home of the Wendigos. More specifically, the realm of Lord Ursa. Now, they acquired the Moonstone. Now they have to leave. One problem, though. They can't leave. At least not yet. Because now they have to fight someone else to leave. Lord Ursa himself. So without further ado, let's dive back in to the World of the Gathering with Chapter 19. Well. Look who came back. Our old friends, the Pinkskins. We missed them, didn't we, boys? The room filled with howls and laughter. Ursa made his way closer to the others, dragging his mighty axe across the bone floor. Did you really think you could just walk into our domain and expect to leave here with our relic? The mighty Wendigo King smiled wickedly, revealing his jagged teeth. Sparrow did, said Symbol. Ursa looked at her and growled. His eyes were glowing red in the firelight. Symbol hid her face from the beast's glare. That was a minor incident, one I have made sure will never happen again. Now hand over the relic, and I promise my men will not make too much of a mess. All the Wendigos howled in unison. It had been many moons since they had a feast. Everyone became worried, until Avalon stepped away from the group, brandishing his weapons. You want the stone? Come and claim it. Ursa bellowed a mighty laugh. It echoed throughout the cave. My, if it isn't the former prince himself, said the king. Everyone was shocked by this sudden news. Look at you. An outcast siding with Pinkskins. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, Ursa mocked. The young Wendigo's anger was boiling. Big talk coming from a chieftain too scared to face the sorcerer himself. Ursa noticed this and was surprised, even impressed by the outburst. He had always admired those who hated him, making killing more regal for him. Ursa ordered his men to make a circle around him and the former prince. The Spartan and his friends watched from outside the ring, worried for their friend's safety. No one has ever challenged Ursa to single combat since he became king. The young hunter thought to himself about how insane this plan was. He clutched his medallion and asked for guidance. The guardian told him this. This is the most dangerous opponent you have ever faced. You cannot lose. Once the circle was drawn, the elite guards hit the stone floor with iron spears and began chanting. Their chants mimicked the throat singing of the nomads of the steppes back on Earth. What are they doing? Whispered Teoda. I believe it's a ceremonial chant, replied Richard. They always perform this when they encounter a worthy adversary. To them, killing a worthy enemy before devouring him is a religious act. It is the only sacredness these people have. I hope Avalon knows what he's doing. They all hoped for their friend. He was the one who inspired them all. If he died, all was lost. Back with Avalon, he stared down his enemy. Both circled each other, trying to discover a weakness. Avalon knew he was at a disadvantage. He had no armor, no spells, and was out of practice. Ursa knew this and thought the fight would be over quickly. Hoping to take his opponent by surprise, the king rushed the young warrior. Avalon sidestepped and slashed the king across his back. The blade glanced off the bone armor. Laughing, Ursa jabbed into the young warrior's stomach with the end of his axe. He stumbled backwards but regained his footing. Catching his breath, a large hand wrapped around his face, lifting him off the ground. The king's clawed nails dug deep into his face as he squeezed tightly. Avalon groaned in pain, feeling his skull being crushed. Lord Ursa then threw him into the air. He found himself gliding through until he hit the ground with an abrupt stop. The young hunter hit the ground so hard, it nearly broke his back, forcing him to then turn on his stomach. His friends could do nothing but watch in horror as their friend fought for his very survival. Crawling on the floor, he grabbed his blades and used them to prop himself up, only to be pinned down again by the king's foot. The Wendigos let out a howl in praise. Forced onto his back again, he looked directly into Lord Ursa's eyes, through his skull helmet. Just as he was about to kill him, Ursa mocked him for the final time. "Who taught you to fight like that?" Realizing the king's face was close to his, Avalon thrust one of his blades into the eye sockets of the skull helmet. The king reared his head in agony, letting go of his grip. The Wendigos and heroes looked in shock at what had just happened. Catching his breath, Avalon saw the massive axe on the floor. Scrambling towards it, he grabbed the shaft and propped himself up. Breathing heavily, he looked at the fallen king, who had just pulled the weapon out from his now bloody eye. Walking towards his fallen foe, he dragged the axe along the dirt. Lying helplessly, Ursa was paralyzed with fear. He had never had anyone harm him before. The once great Wendigo chief felt fear grip him. Looking out of his one good eye, he saw the prince hovering above him. Everyone held their breath at what happened next. Using all of his strength left, he lifted the mighty axe over his head and swung down on Ursa's skull, splitting it in half. A loud crunch and thud filled the room, and then there was nothing. Avalon let go of the handle, huffing and puffing. He looked at the dead body and gave his answer to the now dead king. "My father." A Praetorian walked over to the bloodied blade on the floor and picked it up. He knelt before him, presenting his sword and looking at the prince. Soon all the Wendigos did the same and knelt before Avalon and his friends. "I'll be damned," said Richard. He had seen many things in this strange land, but this was something he did not expect. Neither did anyone else. Avalon, still recovering from the fight, took the weapon. His hand was still shaking from being thrown to the ground. As he gripped the handle, he placed it at his side. He turned his head back at the Wendigos and gestured a nod. Suddenly the room was filled with cheers and chants, this time of a different tone. "What are they saying?" asked Tira. Richard knew what they were saying, and he could not believe they were actually chanting it. They're saying, "Long live the king." Spero, Moy, and everyone else's mouths dropped. Avalon looked all around him. Tears began to form in his eyes. Chuckling, he smiled triumphantly. Their odds had just improved. Chapter 20. The heroes were escorted out of the forest and back into the plains with their new army. At the forest's edge, everybody retrieved their belongings. Amanus asked Avalon to translate for him. Pardon me. Tell them that a great battle is approaching and will need their help. Tell them to meet at the mountain castle. They must hold back the sorcerer's army until we defeat the tyrant. As he finished, the new king repeated the message to the Wendigos. The Wendigos howled in unison, eager to kill the tyrant and his men. One stayed behind while the majority returned to their forest home to prepare for combat. It was a Praetorian. "I will stay with you," he said. Everyone stopped what they were doing. This night was getting crazier by the moment. This was the first time anyone had ever heard a Wendigo speak their language other than Avalon and Ursa. "You know our words?" inquired Decimus. The Praetorian nodded his head yes. He removed his animal shawl that covered his face. And as he did so, the heroes got a good view of his face. He had very similar human features, albeit more primitive. His skin was fair, with some hair patches covering his face, and he resembled a much older Avalon. His eyes, black as night, reflected white under the moon's gaze. Like others, his teeth were fanged, but not as massive and of a decent size. "My name is Vortigern, Praetorian of the former king of the Wendigos. I'm at your service of all time, my lord. I'm glad to see you have survived, old friend. Before Ursa usurped Avalon's father, Vortigern was his former teacher and protector of the realm. He taught him how to hunt, track, and above all how to fight. Vortigern also gave Avalon the medallion around him, saying it was a family heirloom. However, Avalon was banished after the revolt, and Vortigern was forced to serve Ursa as his champion. However, he always made sure to keep the prince safe, as a promise to his father. Your real name's Vortigern? Questioned Simple. She was expecting a more beastly name like Razorback or Snaggleteeth. Vortigern sounded more regal, almost Celtic. He smiled at the young woman. Yes, my lady. I know my name is not something one would expect from us. However, we were not always cannibals. We became that when Lord Ursa took control. We had a sense of honor long ago, and I wish to return to that. After introductions were finished, the heroes decided to make the long journey back to camp. However, Richard and his two friends stayed behind. They explained they wanted to make sure no one was following them and to cover their tracks. Not wanting to argue, the others rode back to the village, leaving Richard, Maury, and Sparrow behind. The three veterans got on their mounts when their comrades were out of sight, and in the calm of night a faint cry was heard above them. Perching itself on Richard's arm was his beloved falcon. Feeding it a low tree, he saw a note wrapped around one of its legs. Grabbing it from the bird, Richard read the inscription. However, he could not see the message adequately. Sparrow handed him a torch, allowing the Englishman to read the news. And as I scanned the lines, he crumpled the paper and threw it over his shoulder. New meeting tonight, said Richard. He wants us to report again. He better keep his end of the bargain once this is done, said Morty. I know he will. He wants something from us, and we are the only ones to give it to him. Sparrow had a concerned look on his face. I hate that we are doing this. We agreed upon what we had to do. Are you having second thoughts? Sparrow shook his head. Richard grabbed the reins and jerked the beast forward. Following behind, Maury and Sparrow ran through the night, meeting their elusive client. Chapter 21. Back at the village, the villagers anxiously awaited their hero's safe return. Many stayed in the temple while others worked at their shops. As minutes passed, many began to fear that the cannibals had captured their heroes and... well, no one wanted to say it. The elders hushed the jittery villagers, casting aside any doubt they had. However, even they knew the chances of survival were very slim. Suddenly, the alarm bell rang, and the guardsmen shouted at the ramparts, "They're alive! They're coming back!" Commotion echoed in the temple, and many rushed outside to welcome their champions. Though still dark, the villagers saw the outline of 7 riders galloping at full speed. Everyone cheered in unison. Amanus held the green stone in his hand victoriously. All were amazed. From the temple, the elders quickly walked down the steps. "You are victorious," said the elders. The young Spartan dismounted and presented the stone to them. "We have the stone. Now all we need is some magic." One of the elders took the stone in his weary hands. "Leave that to us." He smiled and walked back with the others to perform a sacred ritual. Removing his helmet, he brushed his fingers through his hair. It was all going to be over soon. "I need a drink," he said. "We could all use a drink," added Decimus. The heroes walked to the only tavern in the village and found a large table with plenty of chairs. Plopping down on the wooden seats, they all let out a much-needed sigh. Exhaustion was a feeling all were sharing. A few moments passed, and the tavern owner handed everyone a flask of alcohol on the house. Taking a sniff, the young heroes reared back at the pungent smell, whereas Avalon and Vortigern simply chuckled. "What the hell is this concoction?" asked Symbol. "Dragon's blood," said the elder one to go. "It's quite a regal drink. It's only served on days of battle, or given to respected soldiers." "The odor is quite foul," replied the Celt. "The odor smells of death. It tastes like molten blood and burns the back of your throat like you just ate burning coals. But it does have some benefits to it." "Which is?" asked Smith. "It increases one's skill, which includes speed, agility, strength, and endurance. One drop, and you'll be just as powerful as any warlord." The new heroes looked at one another. Grabbing their cups, they gulped down the flask. Upon consumption, the newcomers were taken aback by its fiery taste. The girl's face turned red, as did the guy's. This alcohol was unlike anything they had ever had in their respective realms. However, not everyone was affected by the alcohol. Avalon and Vortigern were already used to the taste, even if they drank equivalent to molten lava. After several minutes, the newcomers began to get used to the intense flavor. Desmond blinked his eyes a few times, while Amos and the others cleared their throats, their faces still red. "Gah, by Zeus's beard, that's strong," gasped Amanus. "That will surely put hair on your chest." "If this thing is that strong, why hasn't everybody had a drink?" asked Symbol. It was a fair question, one that Avalon had an answer to. "There is one drawback to this. Too much consumption, and you'll die on the spot." Thus, it's only used sparingly and in small amounts, stated Avalon. As the heroes drank some more of the dragon's blood, the sense of battle faded in their hearts. Halfway through the night, the heroes began discussing their stories from their homes and who they were before all of this. Everyone at the table told their stories except for Avalon, who was silent throughout the entire exchange. He watched them and studied their interactions. This was the first time he had fully interacted with them up close. It felt very familiar. So this is what it's like to be amongst them, he thought to himself. Avalon was so deep in his thought that he did not hear one of them calling his name. Avalon, what about you? Do you have any stories of home? Young Wendigo broke from his thoughts and looked at the table. All eyes were on him now. Well, yes, there is one tale my father told me, and it parallels to what we are experiencing right now, said the young hunter. Everyone was intrigued. Well, don't just sit there, tell us then. Clearing his throat, Avalon told the heroes the most magnificent tale ever told. The 3 clans of Nairon and the Warriors of the Moon. Centuries before the first champions were summoned to this land, 3 mighty tribes fought for control. Were the Wendigos one of these tribes? Asked Simple. No, we Wendigos did not exist at the time. The 3 tribes were the Aedos, Saurians, and Desmodus. Each one very different from the next. In the past, as Avalon explained, all 3 clans fought each other in tribal warfare, each experiencing high casualties. To prevent the extinction of their people, they agreed to build an arena in the desert and train champions to fight for their people and the right to rule this land. Sounds like the gladiators of Rome, said Decimus. Avalon nodded. Yes, very much like your gladiators. New champions were trained and brought to the arena each year, and neither side won. They all kept killing each other. And then, one year, 3 champions emerged. Good ones at that. Jagan, Calvin, and Xiong. Each wanted the arena's glory. Yet something unexpected happened during the fights. He felt his medallion hum and glow a blue hue. Now was not the time, he heard his medallion tell. He wanted to tell them the truth. But instead of telling them, he only gave them half of the story. Then, according to legend, a great serpent descended from the skies, the heavens, and rained chaos on the 3 clans. All fled in horror, except for the 3. What happened to them? Asked Simple. The young Celt felt like a little girl listening to an epic tale back home. As Avalon continued, after the heroes escaped the serpent and fled into the Dark Moon Forest, they found a powerful weapon and used its magical properties to create new weapons, granting them power beyond their wildest dreams. What happened next? They all wondered. Avalon smiled. After that encounter, they vowed to fight as one and led a charge back to the arena, where the battle was intense. And the serpent fell to their blades. Its body soon disintegrated and washed away by the sands of time. Since that day, the 3 champions became a beacon of hope for their people, bringing about a sense of unity for the first time. Their example of courage, loyalty, and honor became the tenets we Wendigos used to follow when my father was still king. I've strived to live by that example every day, and I see that determination in all of you. After he finished his tale, the Chronic and 7 mages gave thunderous applause. The conspiracy moved all, stoking the fires of courage within them. Quite a tale, Avalon. Thank you for sharing it with us. He had not heard a Sebastian's speech since the Battle of Platea. Just as everyone sat back down, the others approached the table, and as they approached, the others got up and bowed before them. Before anyone could say another word, the mood changed, and one of the villagers came running to the taverns, bloodied and screaming. Animus took charge and went to the villager. It was a young boy, no older than 10. Speak, boy, what happened? Why are you bloody? The child said nothing and pointed outside. The Spartan called Avalon over to him. Watch over him. Everyone else outside. Everyone went to the gate entrance, with the young hunter watching over the boy. This night was far from over. Chapter 22. Decimus saw the silhouettes of 2 bodies at the village gates. The Roman rushed to the entrance, stopping at the horrid sight. Not far behind, Tyr and the others caught up to him. Decimus, what is it? What are you... By the gods! She put her hand over her mouth in sheer horror at what she saw. They were the partially eaten bodies of the boy's parents, courtesy of Ares. The father's skull was smashed open and covered in vicious bite marks. His organs were utterly exposed, and his lower half was nowhere to be found. The mother fared no better and was missing both arms, her back ripped open, and her face unrecognizable. It was a grotesque sight. Soon everyone arrived at the entrance and saw. Avalon slowly approached the bodies and inspected them carefully. "What happened?" asked Teodo. The hunter let out a deep sigh and tried to contain his emotions. "It's a recent kill. Only took place a few hours ago, and judging from the wounds, they were made by Ares' hounds. No mistaking it. It seems the couple were taken by surprise and were still alive when they were..." Avalon paused, trying to gather his composure before continuing. "Being eaten alive." The villagers gasped and shocked. There was no end to Kairos' savagery. "Anything else?" Decimus asked in a soft tone. Even after everything he seen back home, he could not get over the death of innocence. Avalon searched the body and found a bloody note deeply pinned on the back of the father. Removing the dagger, he inspected the letter. It read, "This is a little incentive to remind you what will happen to everyone else, including your beloved mage. If you do not bring the stone to Castle Olympus, you'll have only a few hours to decide how many more must die." Everyone was worried. Dawn was nearly upon them, and the castle was 5 miles away. Realizing they were out of options, Adams decided to enact Phase 2 of his plan. He gathered everyone to the main hall. "It's time to end this." And with that, we will stop here. Now, it's getting good. And a little more intrigue. What happened with Richard, Maury, and Sparrow? Where have they gone? You'll have to stay up to date with next week's episode. And until then, thank you all so much. This is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.